Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 445. 1864. Part 1. Dokja Ajusi? I hesitated while watching the distant battle between two Yu Hyaks. Your incarnation body's condition is currently unstable. I'd not be any help whatsoever if I joined the fight in my current condition. And when I took a closer look, the ones fighting were 999 and the secretive plotter. I wasn't sure why, but 999 must have decided to side with us. I clenched my fists tightly. Kim Dokja made a decision. There was only one method remaining. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Just like back then against Nirvana, or during the fight against Poseidon. Magnaya, what are you hesitating for? The great sage, Heaven's equal, spoke to me. Even though he was in the middle of a huge battle in the sky, he still sensed my emotions. I muttered in a voice that could barely be heard. I've gotten a little afraid of reading them. It was probably after fighting against Yu Hyak back in the Isle of Reincarnators. And more recently, right after I heard what 999 had to say. Do you still believe that you can understand someone through just a few lines of text in a couple of chapters? Up until now, I had been a reader of the stories. However, for how long would it be okay for me to remain as one? Right, you possess the power to read another person. He had accurately guessed my ability. He stuck around my channel for a long time as the prisoner of the golden headband, so it wouldn't have been that difficult to figure that much out. There was a time when I too wanted to know more about someone. I sensed the great sage's gaze landing on Yusanga. Or more correctly, not her exactly, but her current incarnation body. He was staring at the body's former owner. I still haven't fully understood why Sanzang chased me out twice. During the original Journey to the West, Sun Wukong was expelled from the party twice. However, I never asked Sanzang about it properly. Maybe it was because of my worthless pride. I was stuck in a loop, thinking and wondering only to myself. Why did that idiot do that? What was the reason for those decisions? What was the point of such obstinacy? What did I do wrong, and where did a problem come from? Even after our journey was over, those questions kept bubbling inside my head. This would be my first time hearing such a story. Even to someone like the great sage, there were unresolved questions reserved only for him. And by the time I finally found the courage to ask, my opportunity had slipped away already. The faintest trace of dejection could be felt from his voice. Since I didn't know much about the story after the conclusion of the Journey to the West, I had no way of estimating the depths of his sadness. One thing that I could be sure of, though, was the fact that the real Sanzang was no longer with us in this world, as Yusanga had reincarnated into the incarnation body in question. And to find out the answers to those questions, we kept repeating this Journey to the West remake, hoping that maybe someone else would tell us the story that I didn't know before, something that I had not read before. Only then did I realize why the great sage participated in this scenario event. I felt curious just then. Did he finally find his answer? I couldn't find it. However, I did find a small solace. The great sage's gaze was now fixed on Shin Yusung. As the Emperor's attacks rained down, he continued to speak. And about that solace, let me tell you all about it. Great Fable, Journey to the West, is continuing with its storytelling. I'd probably never get to understand certain things. I'd never even get close, and maybe everything I did might be in vain. However, even if we know it's impossible, we still have to read the fable. That is what it means to exist as constellations, as the stars of the heavens. The great sage failed to understand Sanzang. And quite likely, he'd never get to understand even into the future. Even then, he didn't give up. That's why you should read it. However, I alone can't. Why do you think you're alone? I reflexively raised my head after hearing his words. Maybe not like you, but people always are reading each other. So, you should not stop reading, either. In a way, this advice wasn't really on point. However, I still ended up feeling a certain something. It was as if small feathers had piled up. I began thinking that maybe this was the solace the great sage felt while watching our story. "You sang SSI." I called out to her, and she looked at me as if she was waiting. "Will you be alright?" "Yes. By the way, if it's possible, be gentle." Yusanga nodded her head and chanted the Constrictive Sutra in my direction. My body slumped to the floor as if a fuse had gone out. My consciousness managed to slip out and quickly flew towards where I needed to go. Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint third stage is activating. Your degree of understanding of the applicable individual is very high. The first-person protagonist's POV is activating. My vision slowly stabilized, and at the same time, powerful strength overflowed within my body. It was Yu Yunghayak's strength. A short while later, the enemy's figure could be seen before us. An existence enveloped in the aura of immense status and arrogantly glancing at us. The secretive plotter. The great sage was right. That guy could never be defeated alone. Let's go. The transcender's status violently raged within my body. I added every ounce of my own status to Yu Yunghayak. Transcender's status has encountered the Demon King's status. The powers that I earned so far interweaved with that of Yu Yunghayak's and began boiling up. Vigorous energy circulated within the blood vessels as if they had a complete overhaul. Yu Yunghayak slowly opened his eyes gleaming in golden light and spoke back to me. "You're late." He didn't get angry or reprimanded me, simply choosing to say that. He probably knew that I was playing the role of Sun Wukong, though. "I'm sorry. Talk about unimportant matters later. Defeating this bastard takes our utmost priority." Kwaya. The plotter's heaven-shaking sword lightly danced, and the Tongtian River was split in half. With nary a hair's breadth, we managed to evade the attack. Constellations and incarnations coincidentally within the range were swept away and became nothing more than fading screams. That was truly a nonsensical attack power. You're struggling in vain. Even if you manage to regain your memories, you still can't defeat me. Because you too also began from me. What is he on about now? Yu Yunghayak, running on the river's surface, replied in annoyance. According to him, I'm not Yu Yunghayak from the third turn. Really? Then, what? I reflexively asked him, but to be honest, several dizzying theories were floating around in my brain already. Perhaps this was the question that had been building up from a long time ago. The third turn Yu Yunghayak shouldn't have known about such information, though. Back during the green zone scenario. No matter what, his rate of growth is just too fast. And even back in the cinema dungeon, too. All the questions I secretly had every time I checked Yu Yunghayak's character list began rising up one after the other. Even the conversation I had with 999 entered my head. Yu Yunghayak in this world line said that he was the third turn. So, this place is the third regression turn. Trusting such information at its face value. How naive. By the time I came around, I was already initiating the character list. Applicable individuals' information is far too numerous. Character list will change to summarized list. For the convenience of the user, only the selected items will be displayed. Plus, character summarized list individual, Yu Yunghayak. Exclusive attribute, regressor third turn, myth, ruler of amusement, legendary. Plus, it said third turn. He was definitely from the third turn. In that case, just what on earth were those guys talking about? Kim Dokja Ri Licantl? Pages of my memories began flipping. Memories that I tried so hard not to recall. That world you've shown me, does it really exist? The applicable individual is not a character. Wake up, Kim Dokja. I abruptly regained my wits after hearing Yu Yunghayak shout. Now wasn't the time to think about something else. The plotter's status as he floated up in the air was strengthening gradually. It seems that you still haven't really regained your memories. I won't lose so easily this time. As if to oppose that rising status, Yu Jung-hyuk raised his own power level. The movement technique, Red Phoenix Shuanpa, and the power of the breaking the sky swordsmanship were pushed to their absolute limits. The breaking the sky thunder sword completely covered the dark heavenly demon sword. He fought in the same manner the last time, and still lost. However, those weren't the only things accompanying him this time. Fifth bookmark has been initiated. Exclusive skill, Lightning Transformation LV. 23, plus 13, has been initiated. Exclusive skill, Way of the Wind LV. 18, plus 8, is activating. Demon King Transformation is activating. Effects of the Way of the Wind were added to Yu Jung-hyuk's Red Phoenix Shuanpa, while the electrical energy from the Lightning Transformation permeated into the Breaking the Sky Thunder Sword. And finally, the power of Demon King was added to the power of Transcender. Double the power, triple, quadruple. Yu Jung-hyuk's status multiplied in an instant and threateningly spread over the Tongtian's surface. Suchachachachit. As the sparks danced in the air, we dashed towards the secretive plotter. The Lightning Transformation and the Breaking the Sky Thunder Sword permeated in the Dark Heavenly Demon Sword. The greatest technique belonging to both Kyrios and the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint emitted blinding light simultaneously, causing a truly incredible storm of sword aura to gush out. Kwaya! This was the power capable of cleanly splitting mountains in half and vaporizing the ocean itself. Unfortunately, the secretive plotter remained unperturbed even when facing such power. Two swords then clashed, emitting screeching friction noise. As I was sharing this sensation with Yu Jung-hyuk, I felt the full brunt of the pain akin to my hands being torn to pieces. We were attacking with both hands, while he used only one. Even then, how pitiful, Yu Jung-hyuk. We failed to cut the secretive plotter. Suchat, suchachachat. Sparks exploding around him indicated that he wasn't even going all out. How could there be such a large gap between our fighting power if that was the case? Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is continuing on with its storytelling. The surroundings were morphing into his stage. The hell of regression that reached 1863 turns. Outer gods moaning in pain inside burning craters and countless corpses of the stars strewn about. The price for escaping the closed universe and dreaming of a new story is for you to not even remember who you are. Is that the world you've been truly wishing for? That evil demon-like voice came from beyond the hellish landscape. I was confused. It was as if I could almost get what he was saying, but at the same time, I couldn't readily accept it. Yu Jung-hyuk, that escaped from a closed universe and dreamed of a new story. I knew of only one Yu Jung-hyuk that fit that criteria. And if that was true, then if the Yu Jung-hyuk I knew was that Yu Jung-hyuk. The fourth wall is getting even thicker. Kim Dokja, we won't win unless you use that powerful skill. Yu Jung-hyuk suddenly yelled out. Utilize the fable from the last time. I knew what he meant by last time. The Hellscape of Eternity, the fable that I used while fighting against Poseidon in the past. Back then, we killed Theseus by borrowing the memories of the 362nd turn Yu Jung-hyuk. I looked at the fable of darkness flowing around the secretive plotter and could only sigh in doubt. Honestly, I'm not sure whether we can win or not even after using that dot. The regression turn I used all my being to read back then was only 362nd. Things would have improved somewhat by now compared to then, but still, I couldn't even guess whether that'd be enough to defeat the guy before our eyes or not. And also, that wasn't the only thing making me hesitant here. If I succeeded in borrowing the strength of Yu Jung-hyuk from higher turn than 362nd, then this Yu Jung-hyuk would lose his memories alongside me. Just like how constellations and incarnations read fables, I too read Yu Jung-hyuk's Ways of Survival. If I used the Hellscape of Eternity here, then Yu Jung-hyuk would have to experience the reading stained by my misunderstandings along with me. The Ways of Survival I read in order to survive. History that I remembered as I pleased. I had one-sidedly twisted or exaggerated the Yu Jung-hyuk in that history. My version was questionable at best, an idealistic depiction of the reality. Damn it. Even then, I had no choice but to do this unfair thing. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, has begun its storytelling. While stuck inside the feeling of powerlessness, I flipped the pages. Whether it was before or after the apocalypse, it was the same story. All I could do at any given moment was to flip through the pages of a book. Countless regression turns of Yu Hyok went past my eyes. Third turn, fourth, 5th, 41st, 182 ND. Memories continued to flow by. Many Yu Hyoks were now staring back at us. 362nd turn. 598th. 724th. Your comprehension is advancing towards a new possibility. Pages you couldn't read before are now available. 862th. 999th. Blood welled inside my throat. Pain pummeled my head as if to shatter it into pieces. 999, the regression turn that I really liked. Yu Hyok's dialogues gradually decreased in the number. This was my limit. You have reached the highest turn you can read. The highest turn Yu Hyok you can read is 999th. The message popped up like the final score tied to the book report. But I couldn't lift up my head. How could reading something be this shameful and feel so wrong? It was an exact moment that Yu Hyok opened his mouth. Doesn't matter how you read it, the one to judge it will be me. So, you simply concentrate on reading. He deflected yet another one of the secretive plotter's attacks even though his body was riddled with wounds. He spoke again. It's my freedom to decide what I hear and what I remember. And I shall decide who I am. With a voice I knew so well, he was talking about a story that I didn't know. You fool, you are not reading it alone. The moment I heard him, something woke up inside me. It wasn't the memories related to the ways of survival. No, it was of the conversation I had with my mother a long time ago. Why are we rereading the story we know already? There were stories that didn't change even if you read it again. It did not change, because the one reading didn't change. My mother replied to that question in this manner. Shall we read it together, then? Reading it together. Your comprehension is rapidly being enhanced. As my head became even more of a mess, the pages that I couldn't flip with my powers alone began flipping over. 1146th. 1398th. 1561th. 1733th. The people I met in this world were flipping the pages together with me. I still failed to understand some things, but I got to figure out a few others just then. And there were some paragraphs that I'd seemingly never understand. I thought I heard the secretive plotter shout something. My consciousness continued to waver. Like a man fighting the drowsiness, I continued to flip the pages again and again, while vomiting blood, while enduring against the merciless barrage of sparks. I still didn't know much about Yu Hyok. You can only return to that world after I die, correct? If you remain here, you won't be able to save that world. However, what if my misunderstanding built up over the period of 10+ years could help me reach just a tiny sliver of understanding like some kind of miracle? I'd become curious about that world's. Then, I'd be able to read it again. The highest turn Yu Hyok you can read is 1863rd. The plotter's status flying in touched the dark heavenly demon sword and scattered away. I dazedly blinked my eyes. As if the overwritten letters were being peeled off, the character list began changing. The number 3 was peeled off, and new numbers were being engraved there, instead. And on top of this empty piece of blinding white paper, a page I had never read before began unfolding. Plus. Character summarized list. Individual, Yu Hyok. Exclusive attribute, Regressor 1864th turn, myth. Plus. It was a completely new story. Chapter 446. 1864. Part 2. The 1864th turn. We were not in the third turn, but in the 1864th world line. The moment I saw that attribute window, waves of realizations that I could barely digest right now crashed into me. This Yu Jung Hyok is the one that disappeared during the 1863rd turn? How can that even be possible? But, didn't that Yu Jung Hyok escape from being a character? Yu Jung Hyok from the 1863rd turn escaped from being a character, because the third turn exists. But if that's true, then how could he be the third turn Yu Jung Hyok from the get-go? Numerous questions brushed past my head, and the last thing to pop up was the final conversation I had with TLS 123. I was thinking of sending you a special gift as a way to express my gratitude, Dokja Nim. That gift the author was talking about, could it be? Quack. The fable's power overflowed, the surrounding view of the hellish landscape began changing. The world was wailing in sorrow, and outer gods fallen into lamentation, cried on. And on that stage of despair, a thin and thread-like, but clear, ray of light existed. It was the sword light belonging to the dark heavenly demon sword. Have you regained your memories, then? The secretive plotter asked, but Yu Jung Hyok didn't reply. I knew why he didn't. Of course, the explosive amount of memories were making an utter mess inside his head, that was why. My reading wasn't perfect. No matter how diligently I read it, and even though Yu Jung Hyok worked together with me, it was physically impossible to completely restore the 1863rd Yu Jung Hyok. As he staggered about, fragmented memories continued to enter his head. Eat dirt, Yu Jung Hyok. Happy memories. Happy memories. Yu Jung Hyok, sit. You son of a. This isn't the time to think about that, you idiot. I hurriedly awakened Yu Jung Hyok. Because, the heaven-shaking sword, carrying the status of a hellscape was slashing towards his nose right at that moment. Along with clang, two swords clashed loudly once more. The attack still felt considerably heavy. However, it wasn't as intolerable as before. I wanted to fight you. For the first time ever, the light of emotions began spreading within the plotter's eyes that used to remain calm no matter what happened. The Yu Jung Hyok who survived the original story I read, and who saw its finale, the secretive plotter, was now talking to us. You bastard, you disappeared to the beyond without a word. I had no idea what he was talking about. It seemed that Yu Jung Hyok, too, had no idea. The stuff I read in great haste was imperfect, and because of that, there were lots of holes in Yu Jung Hyok's memories. He then angrily spat out. Looks like I'll have to teach you how not to speak in riddles. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch that Swallowed the Myth, has begun its storytelling. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is continuing on with its storytelling. The fables we shared were shoved into the dark heavenly demon sword simultaneously. The ensuing attack clashed against the heaven-shaking sword. And the moment two hellscapes collided, a whole universe opened up between the blades. It was basically a big bang of memories. Two remarkably similar beings are colliding. Disconnected film theory is activating. The moment I saw the view of the universe, I instantly realized which phenomenon was about to unfold here. It was none other than the disconnected film theory. A similar event also occurred back when the two Shin Yusungs from the two different world lines met. This is a new world line? These memories were brought up to the surface after two definitely similar Yu Jung Hyoks, walking on completely opposing paths, collided. It's not possible for this kind of a world line to exist. These were the plotter's memories. Memories of the very day that he had discovered this particular third turn. Interesting. Is this really the third turn? The secretive plotter couldn't tear his eyes away from the third turn story playing out before his eyes. Someone he didn't recognize was advancing the story along with himself from the third turn. He couldn't understand how such a thing could even be possible. However, you'll still fail. They used some methods he recognized, while he hadn't even thought of some others before. Sometimes, they looked to be reckless, and in some other times, they got real lucky. This was a fable he had never seen before. The secretive plotter watched the fable of this world line as if he was sucked right into it. And so, how long had he been watching this fable? He finally realized that he had become exactly the same as the constellations that he loathed so much. All the Yu Hyaks he had absorbed were talking to him. Have you forgotten, the great plotter? We wish for death. That regression turn will not succeed, anyway. Death. That was the ardent wish of all Yu Hyaks, cursed with the fate of regression. The secretive plotter existed solely for the sake of fulfilling that mission. It's impossible to kill the most ancient dream. As long as we are alive, we must regress again. Even if dying is impossible, what would it be like to get infinitely close to it? The reason for sending Han Suyang's avatar to the 1863rd turn was precisely because of that. By using the irregular discovered in this third turn, they'd complete their death. He was planning to seal away every Yu Hyak via the disconnected film theory. To merge with the 1863rd Yu Hyak and fall into an everlasting slumber. But on the verge of that plan's completion, he had a sudden change of heart. I'm simply heading towards the final chapter. It was because of one certain constellation that searched for his own. The final chapter. The name of that he dearly wished for, but never received. 41st turns Yu Hyak is shocked. 416th turns Yu Hyak is shocked. 967th turns Yu Hyak is shocked. 1472nd turns Yu Hyak is shocked. Yu Hyaks from all the regression turns inside him also witnessed that spectacle. Some Yu Hyaks marveled, some despaired. And some Yu Hyaks grew furious. The secretive plotter belonged to the last category. It's not possible for another final chapter to exist. His world had already come to an end. He had reached his conclusion by going through trials and errors of the 1863rd regression turn. He had lost everything, and he witnessed the end of all scenarios. And he reached that wall. He hadn't been wrong, and he wanted validation for it. Let's say that you reached the end and saved the world through your methods. If so, what are you going to do about the other worlds? What will happen to other worlds that you didn't save? And so, the secretive plotter sent Kim Dokja to the 1863rd turn. He made the fool witness the end of the story. To tell him, this is the true original story. To tell him, this is the end of the world I have decided on, and nothing can change that fact, no matter what. I'll end your story for you. However, Kim Dokja, I won't be returning to the third turn. I'll remain here and witness the end with the people of this place. He changed that. Sucha-cha-cha-cha-chit. The Yu Hyak sealing plan failed, and the direction of the story that should have been set in stone was diverted. 1863rd turns Yu Hyak is refusing to cooperate with you. I wish to live. Yu Hyak, who should have been sealed away, chose regression instead, and entered a brand new world. The secretive plotter hurriedly collected the memories of all the dead Yu Hyaks and chased after him. He chased after the Yu Hyak wearing the white coat, crossing the blinding starlights of the world lines while his memories scattered away. This Yu Hyak had cast off the mask of character and flew towards the brand new world. Stop. You cannot head to the next part. Only the secretive plotter knew of this world's conclusion. The 1863rd turn was the end of all stories. And after it was, I wish to witness that world. Return to me. The place you're supposed to be is here. You. The secretive plotter roared out. Even if the most ancient dream permitted this regression, in the end Yu Hyak was bound to repeat the nightmare again. And not to forget, him starting the scenarios without his memories would mean. That fool definitely said it. He said that universe definitely exists. Most ancient dream is growing curious of that story. Yu Hyak was reaching out. He was now picturing it, a world located so far away. A world that didn't exist within the universe of the ways of survival. The secretive plotter managed to catch up to Yu Yunghayak's soul form in the nick of time. But what he grabbed onto was simply the white coat. Yu Yunghayak's body had already disappeared by then. The secretive plotter muttered out hollowly. "You fool." The Yu Yunghayak who lost his memories succeeded in regressing. This would be another feudal story where the beginning and the end were already set in stone. The everlasting nightmare was about to repeat itself again in that place. The secretive plotter began searching for this world line. He wanted to learn more about the world line that the oh-so-amazing idiot disappeared into, even at the cost of his memories. The plotter thought that he'd feel better about himself after witnessing that fool living out the scenarios in wretched, broken misery and regret. Eventually, he discovered the world line in question. Shockingly enough, he knew about this world line already. This can't be possible. But only then, everything seemed to click into place. The reason why a world line he didn't recognize suddenly appeared. The reason why a completely different world line existed where the third turn should have been. Every regression he experienced was used as a sacrifice to create this world line above the wall. Most ancient dream is dreaming the final dream. This was the impossible world line, created by the end result interfering with the cause. His universe was shaking now. As the explosion resounded out, Yu Yunghayak's and the plotter's figures separated. We fixed our grip on the dark heavenly demon sword and glared at the enemy before us. The secretive plotter spoke. "Now you know. This universe shouldn't even exist." Finally, I could understand what this guy was talking about. And also, I could understand just a little how this world line came to be, and why these events had occurred. The beyond that Yu Yunghayak from 1863rd turn chose during his regression, that was the regression turn we were experiencing right now. What a cruel thing this is. You just about managed to escape from being the puppet of the nightmare, yet you became the puppet once more. His tone of voice was heavy with grief. I couldn't even fathom the depths of resentment contained within his words. If you read the same book hundreds of times, you might come up with a different interpretation. However, the text will not change. Because those are the events that had already ended, and can't be turned back to the beginning. The plotter's heaven-shaking sword was drawing a long trajectory in the sky. It contained the weight of the 1863rd turn. The one who used to be Yu Yunghayak once upon a time, but now lived on as the secretive plotter. The one who dreamed of the death of all the Yu Yunghayaks in the world. He spoke up once more. The only reason why all of you managed to survive was because I exist. And that existence was wielding his history like a weapon. All of you, you should have died in that subway. Or back in that cinema dungeon. You should have died at Nirvana's hands, and should have perished in the dark castle. He was right. You should have died in the demon world. You should have died during the Gigantomachia, and you should have all died tens, no, hundreds of times already during the Great War of Saints and Demons, and during the journey to the West. If his life didn't exist, if his failures didn't exist, then none of us would have survived until now. So, how did you all manage to survive? And now, he was asking us. Why is it not me, but you? Chapter 447. 1864. Part 3. I recalled that time when I visited the 1863rd turn. When I first saw the 1863rd turn Yu Yunghayak, I thought that he was the Yu Yunghayak from the original. The main character that I spent my childhood years with, the very one that propped up my life. But then, he was not him. The Yu Yunghayak who helped me endure, had finished his tale a long time ago. He had reached the conclusion of the 1863rd turn and witnessed the end of the world, and then, roamed the horrifying abyss of the world lines. For thousands of years, maybe even for tens of thousands. I didn't know just how long he lived on like that. But, what I knew for sure was that he had survived until now. 2, he remembered all of those times, and he was being hostile towards me. You all do not possess the right to witness the. He was right. The only reason why I managed to wade past the scenarios was due to the plotter's life preceding mine. His status was growing even stronger. The outer gods observing the situation in the vicinity all knelt down simultaneously. Oh. His aura mushrooming up like clouds wrapped around the heaven-shaking sword. That was the power he gained after living through 1863 lives, and also, while roaming the world lines afterwards. Great fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, has begun its storytelling. Countless Yu Hyaks were looking straight at me from inside him. Yu Hyak from 41st turn is looking at you. Yu Hyak from 362nd turn is looking at you. Yu Hyak from 666th turn is looking at you. Yu Hyak from 999th turn is looking at you. The histories they had compiled together, all their sins, they were right there. Sins so numerous that not even Jopiel's eye of sin could see the end of. He was an existence deemed to be terror by this star stream. A being that went beyond the boundaries of evil and had been declared as incomprehensible by the world. He was the king of the outer gods. However, his true nature was neither evil nor was it terror. No, the reason why he had to be ostracized by the star stream was because his character proved to be simply too uncompromising. I shall destroy the star stream. And the thing was, the star stream didn't like such characters that lacked any flexibility whatsoever. One's character had to bend sometimes, had to know when to yield, and also had to know when to crumble away. However, the secretive plotter wasn't a character like that. That's why he was able to get this far, and was able to become the secretive plotter. I shall definitely kill the one that started this story with these hands. That was the apocalypse of this world, the one he wished for. And also, the end of regression that all you young Hyaks wished for, as well. Constellation, secretive plotter, is looking at you. He was definitely in the right. He definitely was far more qualified than anyone to witness the conclusion of all the stories. Especially so, when compared to someone like me, whose only achievement was reading the ways of survival. Stop with your unnecessary thoughts. And don't stupidly sympathize with him either, said Yu Hyak. Are you planning to yield to some random bastard after you came this far? Was the fable you managed to compile so far created solely by copying that bastard's life? I couldn't reply. If you sympathize with what he says, then it's the same thing as denying the lives of your comrades who fought alongside you. For sure, I did rely on the ways of survival in the beginning to skirt past the dangers, but things were different after that. Events that didn't happen during the original novel occurred, and dangers not found within it also came to visit us. And I managed to overcome those dangers with my comrades. As our fable continued to grow, so did my distance from the ways of survival, and from a certain moment on, I stopped consulting the original. That was also the reason why I hadn't read the final revised version yet. This world was not the same one from the ways of survival that the secretive plotter lived through. Yu Hyak continued to speak. He could be right. His decisions might have been right, too. However, it's still not a good enough reason for you to yield to him. Fable, Comrade of Life and Death, has begun its storytelling. Because we are also right, said Yu Hyak, the one who also endured the tragedies of the 1863 regression turns. Without a doubt, he too was also Yu Hyak. It still doesn't really feel real to me, but if I had been truly experiencing the 1864th turn, then... Yu Hyak, gripping the dark heavenly demon sword, shifted his gaze for a brief moment towards our companions on the Tongtian River. E.G. Hai's fleet was continuing their barrage, and Shin Yusung's Chimera Dragon was spewing out its breath attack. Yi Hyansong, gripped tightly by Zhang Huiwen, was also fighting hard as well. Meanwhile, Zhang Haiyang was running hard with Yi Gilyang on her back. None had died, and they were trying their best, so that they could see the end of this stinking world. Most likely, I came here to witness this sight. The dark heavenly demon sword and the heaven-shaking sword clashed once more. Two swords that didn't want to back down continued to roar on, their blades filled with the self-belief of their wielders. The secretive plotter shouted out. Do you still not understand? Even if you have regained your memories. How persistent. Just what do you expect to hear from me, then? What? Do you want us to admit our loss? If not, do you want us to understand your life? Understand? You can keep your. Indeed, you probably don't need it. Yu Young-hyuk replied disinterestedly. And because he was also Yu Young-hyuk, he could say these following words. I too don't need you to understand me. He said that, because they understood each other already. Loud metallic clangs resounded out every time two swords collided. One status violently clashed against another status. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is roaring out. Two hellish landscapes intertwined to create this battlefield. Frustratingly, all I could do was to watch these two Yu Young-hyuks. And do whatever it took to flip these damn pages. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, is thrashing violently. The winner couldn't easily be decided. Even then, the secretive plotter remained utterly relaxed. Perhaps that was obvious, our side only just got to use the power of the 1863rd turn, after all. In terms of proficiency and familiarity, we were in an overwhelmingly disadvantageous position. Maybe thinking that victory was in the bag now, the secretive plotter leisurely asked a question. I'm curious. The puppet of the most ancient dream, what is the conclusion you wish to see? And why should I answer you? Could it be that it's the same thing as that demon king of salvation? Do you honestly believe that, man? Two blades clashed in midair and huge shockwaves spread out. Yu Young-hyuk took a step back while wiping the blood off his lips. You have no idea. No idea how pathetic that comrade you trust so much actually is. You don't know what the conclusion of the world he wishes for is. The secretive plotter faintly grinned as he rained down his, breaking the sky swordsmanship. When this world line opened for the first time, Kim Dokja's goal was to merely survive. I dazedly raised my head and looked at Yu Sang-ah. Quite likely, this woman will die. And so will I. In the gap between the two blades, the fables I lived through were breathing with life. His next goal was to become stronger by using you. Make me your comrade. I can fill in the part you lack. Yu Young-hyuk is definitely necessary in order to clear the numerous scenarios still remaining in the future. As if pages were flipping over, fables I lived through were being projected right before our eyes. As if to stop that story, Yu Young-hyuk viciously swung his sword, but all of his attempts were denied by the plotter's heaven-shaking sword. Meanwhile, the plotter continued on. After that, well. After he found himself with a little bit of leeway, he even dared to dream of this world's conclusion. Hyung, aren't you going to make a wish for something? I quietly stared at Lee Gil-young for a little while before making my reply. I made a wish to see the epilogue of a certain novel. The great sage Heaven's Equal said this before, that it wasn't only me who read other people. Just as I've read them, they were also reading me at the same time, he said. He was right. While I was busy reading The Ways of Survival, the secretive plotter was also reading my story. He had been observing the entirety of the life I experienced. Kim Dokja began dreaming the same thing that I used to dream about once upon a time. He wanted to destroy the heavens' star stream and destroy the world beyond the wall that I couldn't overcome. He wanted to save every one of his comrades, and even I saw the group of nebulas floating in the middle of the darkened sky. Vedas, Olympus, Papyrus. I shall never forget everything you have done. I will create a fable that hasn't existed before. Memories continued to stream by before our eyes. Some were as exactly as I remembered, while some were distorted or twisted around. Because it wasn't an intact fable, that's why. This was the plotter's interpretation of Kim Dokja's story. This is what the secretive plotter feels. He continued to speak. Kim Dokja will not achieve that goal now. Specifically, he won't be able to. I wanted to ask why he thought that. The fourth wall is faintly shaking. A fable could be made up, but it'll never tell a lie. The plotter's left hand touched Yu Yunghayak's hair. The dark heavenly demon sword reflexively slapped that hand away, but by then it was too late. Fable, one who is loved by an archangel, has begun its storytelling. As if they were newborn babies, the fables I possessed began crying out one by one. Some of them were fables I was familiar with. On the other hand, Fable, the fifth Sun Wukong, has begun its storytelling. Some were fables I had earned not too long ago. And Fable, rival acknowledged by the dragon, has begun its storytelling. Fable, the sea god's comrade in arms, has begun its storytelling. Fable, Goryo's number 2 sword, has begun its storytelling. And there were some fables that I didn't even know I had them. All of my fables were speaking up at the same time. Oh, Demon King of Salvation. You can't destroy the star stream. Stars in the sky were flickering brightly. They were the same stars that I used to hate. Constellation, god of wine and ecstasy, is watching you. Constellation, father of the rich knight, is watching you. Those who had been watching me, allowing me to get this far. Constellation, queen of the darkest spring, is watching you. My supposedly oldest enemies. Because you do not hate the constellations. Even as I listened to this secretive plotter, I couldn't say anything. I wanted to say that it wasn't true. I wanted to say that I hated constellations. I wanted to say that bringing them down was still one of my goals. However, I couldn't. Because, goddammit, Constellation, maritime war god, is watching you. I knew now that not every star in the sky emitted the same sort of light as the others. Constellation, bald general of justice, is watching you. Constellation, Goryo's first sword, is watching you. From the absolute throne scenario to the demon world. Without the probability they had gathered for us, I'd not be able to get this far. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is watching you. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is watching you. Constellation, most ancient liberator, is watching you. I had no choice but to acknowledge it. All of my fables were created together with them. You do not wish for any loss to occur to this world line. Because you grew to love this story. And that is why, as if he was putting a full stop on the story, the secretive plotter declared loudly. You shall never witness this world's. Thunders roared in the heavens. The battle between the great sage and emperor was intensifying. Many audience members are watching your battlefield. Constellations were looking down at us from above. Some pitied me, while some got angry in my stead. Countless indirect messages flooded in endlessly. Yu Yunghayak remained wordless. The raindrops falling on the Tongtian River substituted for any spoken words. I wanted to say something, anything. But before I could open my mouth, though, someone else stole the opportunity away. So? What is it that you're trying to say here? It was Yu Yunghayak. Since Kim Dokja doesn't have the qualification, you will see this world in his stead, is that it? A faint crease formed on the forehead of the secretive plotter. It seems that you can't think straight anymore. That man whom you thought of as your comrade is no different to the constellations that you hate. That bastard is. He's a pathetic fool, indeed. Yu Yunghayak cut him off in the middle. He was just some contracted worker for a no-name game developer, and his hobby was reading novels. His shabby self-introduction-like words reverberated around the sky. Those were the things I told Yu Yunghayak some time ago. His specialty is to run his cocky mouth off, and he has this habit of throwing his life away so that we can overcome any and all impossible situations hindering us. Yu Yunghayak was talking about me that even I didn't know about. Someone like that managed to lead his companions this far. The dark heavenly demon sword shoved the heaven-shaking sword along with a loud kriawak. For the first time ever since the battle commenced, Yu Yunghayak was going on a concentrated offensive. The plotter's expression shook. Yu Yunghayak's sword strikes were now digging into the outer god's defenses for the first time. Regardless of what the incoming conclusion is, this world wouldn't have come this far without him around. You don't know it. It seems to me that you're the one who can't think straight here. Why are you interfering with this world line, then? The wrathful, breaking the sky swordsmanship, mowed the darkness down. The plotter's figure wavered around greatly as he was pushed back. Not missing that small opening, Yu Yunghayak's sword rained down like a raging storm. What is your goal, anyway? If you found Kim Dokja an eyesore, why didn't you kill him earlier? If you found him using your life to survive that disgusting, then... The dark heavenly demon sword was now aiming at the neck of the secretive plotter. Constellation, secretive plotter, is glaring at the incarnation, Yu Yunghayak. The moment when the two gazes collided, Yu Yunghayak asked again. Why are you still watching this story? Chapter 448. 1864. Part 4. Why did the secretive plotter watch our fable until now? Answer me. He was the king of outer gods, and he had seen his conclusion. Meaning, if he wanted to eliminate me, he'd have done so even if it cost a huge amount of probability. However, he didn't do that. The secretive plotter was now looking at Yu Yunghayak and me. His consciousness was far too deep and extensive that I'd not be able to understand even if I used the omniscient reader's viewpoint on him. That might have been the case, but at least in this moment, I thought that I could understand him. If I plagiarized the ways of survival for my novel, then what were you plagiarized from? Han Suyang of the 1863rd turn asked me that question. Even though I knew the answer, I didn't give her one. Because I didn't want to admit it. The world created by her during the 1863rd turn was, in a way, far more complete than the life I had led. Everyone from the original novel was alive, and Seoul possessed the necessary infrastructure to deal with the final scenario, too. The only thing missing in that picture was Yu Yunghayak. I thought that was unfair. I thought that the world copied from the original with its main character excluded was wrong. Certain copies can surpass the original. Despite that, I couldn't take my eyes off the world that Han Suyang had created. Even when I thought it was wrong. Because her story contained the elements that I was also aiming for. Constellation, secretive plotter, is looking at you. Did copyright exist for one's life, too? But, was it okay to describe one's life as a work of an author? Demon King of Salvation. The one who offered up his life for the sake of another world line's success was now looking straight at me. The only man in this world who possessed the right to witness the conclusion. Even then, he couldn't see the end he wanted to see. Such a man grabbed Yu Yunghayak's dark heavenly demon sword with his bare hand and spoke up. Is a story with no proper ending a failed story? Fables flowed out from the fingers cut by the blade. Fables that I was intimately familiar with. The story that I read for over 10 years. Do you truly, honestly believe that a proper conclusion exists in this world? Yu Yunghayak hurriedly swung the dark heavenly demon sword, causing the plotter's figure to distance himself. Stay sharp, Kim Dokja. He's going to come at us seriously now. Attribute, Demon Kingslayer, is activating. Attribute, Terror of Stars, is activating. The sword made to cut down demon kings and constellation began crying out. Fable, Hellscape of Eternity, is howling out. Great Fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, is continuing with its storytelling. A person who completed a great fable through nothing but his own life was right before us. Kagagagak. We couldn't handle the approaching fable and were forced back. Like soaked cotton, the whole body felt heavy. The Tongtian's waters overturned and the bottom of the river got exposed. We used the exposed bottom as our support and swung the sword towards the sky. Breaking the sky swordsmanship. Destruction technique. Breaking the sky meteor strike. The thunderbolt stabbing into the sky shot out from the tip of the dark heavenly demon sword. The statuses of a demon king and a constellation, as well as a transcender, were added on top of the multiple sword lights that hacked the sky like a falling meteor shower. And the other side shifted his heaven-shaking sword, as well. Quaqua quaqua. He also possessed the same techniques we possessed. Two identical meteor showers collided in the air and a massive explosion rang out. When the technique was the same, what decided the outcome was the proficiency as well as the status of the fable. Great Fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, is remembering the story. Unfortunately, we couldn't claim an advantage in either of those aspects. Kim Dokja. That didn't mean we'd back off here, though. I desperately unleashed other fables while still operating the hellscape of eternity. Fable, One Who Murdered the Outer God, has begun its storytelling. The reason why our opponent held the upper hand was due to the two attributes, Demon Kingslayer and Terror of Stars. In that case, we needed to unshackle the fable that allowed us to fight against the outer god. Kugugugugu. One status collided with another. Blood trickled down Yu Yunghayak's nose. However, he didn't back away. Not just him, but even the fables seemed to understand it. They perhaps knew that, if they stopped telling their stories now, then all stories would stop right here. It's useless. The plotter's status moved. The Great Fable's aura that previously existed in vague ripples was rapidly changing. The Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse morphed into a giant, and its huge palm began crushing down on us. Yu Yunghyak roared out in opposition. We too have great fables. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is continuing with its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch That Swallowed the Myth, is continuing with its storytelling. The world of the great fables streamed past before our eyes. The Demon World Spring that battled against Surya during the Demon King selection. The torch that swallowed the myth we earned while experiencing the Gigantomachia. Two great fables, one taking on the figure of a lion while the other, a dragon, began biting and tearing into the giant's palm, and resisted it. 41st turns, Yu Yunghyak is watching you. 666th turns, Yu Yunghyak is watching you. 999th turns, Yu Yunghyak is watching you. Countless Yu Yunghayaks within the secretive plotter were observing this battle. I recalled the 666 and 999 in my mind. They should be in there somewhere. Along with the plotter himself, they had been watching me from the beginning of this world line. They were watching the heated battle between two Yu Yunghayaks and were growing agitated. The stage transformation is activating. The sky split open, then light and darkness began creating a new world. Great Fable, Season of Light and Darkness, has begun its storytelling. The Season of Light and Darkness was our great fable. But at the same time, it was the plotter's fable, as well. And even in this great fable, Yu Yunghyak still lost to the plotter. You cannot win. The effects of the stage transformation were absolute. The history of defeat would only go on to create yet another history of defeat. A man wearing a white coat was looking up at the sky. And the man wearing the black coat met that gaze dot. The plotter's eyes trembled. Without a doubt, this was the exact same battle against the same Yu Yunghyak as before. Yet, something was different. The plotter looked down at his own coat. It was black. The color of his coat was the opposite. Light and darkness were colliding. And one single watcher was observing the whole story dot. Incredible status gathered on Yu Yunghayak's right arm. It was clear which technique he was planning to use. The greatest technique the current him could call upon, the shooting star slash. Back during the Apocalypse Dragon battle, Yu Yunghyak failed to defeat the secretive plotter with this technique. Incarnation, Zhang Huiwen, has temporarily transferred her share of the great fable. Everyone from Kim Dokja Company in the not-too-distant battlefield was adding their strength to us. Everyone who held shares in the great fable was now participating in this battle. Incarnation, Han Suyang, has temporarily transferred her share of the great fable. Incarnation, Xin Yusung, has temporarily transferred her share of the great fable. Incarnation, Yi Gilyang, has temporarily transferred his share of the great fable. Every fable of Kim Dokja Company gathered on Yu Yunghayak's dark heavenly demon sword. After seeing his fable balloon up like that, the secretive plotter began pouring out his own status as well. They might be two identical Yu Yung Hyaks, but the fables they created were completely different. Who is Yu Yung Hyak? The fables they possessed acted like that question's answer. Great Fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, is continuing with its storytelling. The fable of the secretive plotter was Yu Yung Hyak from the first regression turn, second, then 100th, and even the 1000th. A fable built up solely by one person's existence, piling up on top of one another. All tragedies had become dull, and only one being's existence grew bloated. The sword light from the swung, dark heavenly demon sword, opposed that very fable. Fable, comrade of life and death, is continuing with its storytelling. That was Yu Yung Hyak's reply. Fable, child of the past and future, has begun its storytelling. Yu Yung Hyak was Shin Yu Sung. Fable, judge of apocalypse, has begun its storytelling. He was Zhang Huiwen, and Fable, false savior, is continuing with its storytelling. He was also Han Suyang. And then Fable, demon king of salvation, is continuing with its storytelling. And he was me. Huaya. The shooting star slash collided with the plotter's great fable. This fight was quite literally at a deadlock, and a moment's carelessness could very well decide the victor. Every fable we possessed powerfully slammed forward. And then 666th turns Yu Yung Hyak is. A very small change occurred in the midst of this battle. 362nd turns Yu Yung Hyak is. A deafening boom went off, and the exploding spray of the river water formed a curtain of grey fog. The river water then rushed down on us and swept Yu Yung Hyak's body away. His consciousness was fading. I subbed for him and dragged the incarnation body towards some nearby floating debris to climb on top of it. When I took a closer look, though, it wasn't some normal piece of debris, but a small island created out of the corpses of the outer gods, instead. It was then that I heard a voice. There is only one difference between you and I. As the grey fog of river water rescinded, the figure of the secretive plotter flopped down on the corpse island revealed itself. You simply got lucky, and I didn't. Suchet, chut. His black coat was in a tattered mess. Sparks were dancing all over his body. 1562nd turns Yu Yung Hyak is. 1321st turns Yu Yung Hyak is. Yu Yung Hyaks inside him were now rebelling against him. They were refusing to heed the plotter's will. 999th turns Yu Yung Hyak wishes to see the end of the 1864th turn. His status was decreasing little by little. And his body was also gradually shrinking, as well. His bulging muscles were getting smaller, and his height decreased, too. Soon, the secretive plotter that lost his status had morphed into the figure of a boy. I staggered back to my Yu Yung Hyak's feet. You. I wanted to say something, but no voice wanted to come out. The absolute majority of the audience are shivering at your battle. A portion of the audience is. We won. Countless indirect messages flooded in, but not one of them entered my head. The secretive plotter was sitting on his but all alone on top of this island. The heaven-shaking sword stabbed into the floor was the only thing supporting him. While gripping the dark heavenly demon sword tightly, I cautiously approached him. Even though he was the same Yu Yung Hyak, why did he have to live such a different life? Why did this guy have to overcome all these tragedies by himself? Great Fable, Pilgrim of the Lonely Apocalypse, is faltering in its storytelling. Was it because he didn't have any comrades? Comrades. 41st turns Yu Yung Hyak is staying vigilant of you. No, he had. He definitely had comrades. Coma Yu Yung Hyaks emerging out of his body were standing right there. Yotsont. Coma Yu Yung Hyaks were now surrounding him protectively. And then, the outer gods were surrounding those Coma Yu Yung Hyaks. There's only one. The history that the secretive plotter had lived through, every part of the ways of survival he lived through was now protecting him. Don't kill him. They were stories that got discarded because they failed to reach the conclusion. I moved Yu Yunghayak's body again and lowered my posture towards them. When I reached out, one of the small outer gods bit the extended finger. Crimson blood formed on the tip of the bitten finger. It was a lie that this world line was a brand new story. Even now, Yu Yunghayak's story, The Ways of Survival, hadn't ended yet. Kim Dokja. He must have regained his consciousness, because Yu Yunghayak began talking to me. I didn't reply immediately, and made my way past the outer gods to approach the secretive plotter. Now in the form of a boy, he was looking up at me while being surrounded by the outer gods. Yu Yunghayak saw me holding the dark heavenly demon sword tightly and spoke. "You'll regret this." "No, I won't." I raised the sword only to slowly sheath it back in its scabbard. "Besides, you weren't going to kill him anyway." Yu Yunghayak's retort came back a little later than usual. "Even if we kill him, he'll simply regress again, anyway." Even if he was saying that, it was pretty clear what he was thinking of right now. We had enough of this tragedy already. Many constellations are watching you. Many constellations can't understand your decision. I didn't make this decision for the sake of earning a fable. And I knew that this wouldn't even offer a tiny speck of solace to a life that lasted for 1864 lives. But, even then. Secretive plotter. I called out and he looked up at me. Even if this world had changed from the original story, even if this world was no longer a simple novel. If it wasn't for this guy's story, this world wouldn't have existed. Without him, the current Kim Dokja wouldn't be here. I definitely owed him a debt. A debt that nothing could possibly repay. You said that a sentence once written can never be changed, right? I disagree with that. Indeed, sentences could be changed. Just like how the revised versions of The Ways of Survival existed. My fable has already come to an end. And then? There is no then. That is what it means to end. Some stories can only begin anew after coming to its end. Back in the world I lived in, there was this guy who repeatedly said that his story would end that year, but he kept it going for over 10 years. And that very story was what helped me to survive. I think I heard that the story was supposed to end at around the 500th chapter, but before I knew it, it went past 1000th, and then, it shot past 2000 chapters. What is it that you want to say? That story was written up to the 3149th chapter, but the 3150th hasn't been written. Even if a full stop had been laid down, as long as the next sentence was written, then the story would continue on. The secretive plotter should be well aware of this, too. Because, he was a guy who had been telling his story far longer than anyone else out there. I spoke with a grin on my face. It feels like that story is still continuing on even right now. And maybe, it is really continuing on. I feel relieved, actually. Because, I'm a constellation, you see. As the plotter's expression hardened, I added something else with a cold voice. Constellations are creatures like that. This was the answer I had chosen. This was the only way to not belittle him, even if it ends up hurting him. The secretive plotter's eyes were glaring straight at me. That story you bastard have seen, his seething voice was directed at me. Will result in your death. It will show you the worst end result imaginable. And as for your nebula, doesn't matter. I knew that what I was saying here could be seen as irresponsible. My petty attempt at atonement could bring upon untold misery and misfortune for everyone else. I knew that. Even then, this was the best I could do right now. Every time that happens, I'll do my best to fight back. The plotter's expression was changing, to one that I couldn't make. An expression seemingly reserved for when analyzing the ends of the distant universe. With that sort of expression, he scanned the battlefield. The rain falling on the battlefield had stopped, and the storm clouds that the great sage Heaven's Equal had summoned were receding away. The great war against the heavenly worlds was drawing to a close. Emperor's fallen constellations were looking up at the great sage and the Yogos. The sense of defeat thickly drawn on their faces told me who today's winner was. Currently, the fabled chamber I'd become the retired SSSSS grade Sun Wukong is in possession of the sacred texts. Scenario will automatically conclude if the sacred texts are guarded for 1 hour. 10 seconds currently remaining until the conclusion of the scenario. Finally, the lengthy scenario was coming to a close. I looked up at the blindingly bright skies of the star stream. The great Dakibis who'd control the final scenario were there, glaring at me. Scenario has concluded. Fable Chamber I've become the retired SSSSS grade Sun Wukong has won the scenario. Bright messages announcing an incredible amount of reward payout and words of congratulations sent by the constellations rained down and blanketed the sky above. I spotted Xing Yusung, with Bu riding on top of her head, hurriedly running towards me while waving around the sacred texts. The title of the texts was the following. I've become the retired SSSSS grade Sun Wukong Ajusi. Shares for Outer God in the applicable scenario is enormous. Star Stream is acknowledging the existence of Outer God. Outer Gods can now officially participate in the scenarios. As the blinding rays of light accompanied them, the Yogos all rose up to the air. Yogos gathering around Sun Wukong as their center all held towards the heavens like a single colony. I heard their cries. It sounded like a song from an unfamiliar foreign country. Next up, I spotted Zhang Huiwen carrying my incarnation body while waving her hand. I might have heard it wrong, but I thought I heard her say, "I finally got you," or something like that. Next up, I saw Yu Sang'a, now the Sakyamuni's successor, and Zhang Haiyang, carrying the enervated Yi Giliang. I looked to my side to discover the secretive plotter witnessing the same spectacle as me. The journey to the west will end here. One scenario came to an end, yet the story continued on. However, even that story would have an end. You have acquired a new great fable. You have partially completed the fourth condition of the hidden scenario, a single fable. And so, ever so quietly, your great fable has completed the first half of the conclusion. The message foretelling the end of this world could be heard. Your nebula has acquired the qualification to enter the final scenario.